Alrighty, so I think we're probably good to get started. Some folks will be trickling in the next few minutes. Um, Great, welcome everybody. Hi, my name is Brendan and I'll be your host this evening. I act as the coordinator for Bird Friendly London. I just wanted to start by letting everyone know that this meeting is being recorded and a video will be shared online later on. If I could ask everyone on the call to please ensure that your microphone is turned off to help minimize background noise during the presentation. So who are we? I mentioned I'm here on behalf of Bird Friendly London. So last year, the City of London, Ontario became certified by Nature Canada as one of the first bird-friendly cities in the country. Bird Friendly London is a grassroots community organization consisting of numerous partners in London. Together, our volunteers work on protecting birds and bird habitat in London and the surrounding area by working on public education, engagement, and stewardship. You can learn more about us by visiting our website, birdfriendlylondon.ca. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the sponsor for this event today, Nature London, who is also a member of the London Bird Team. We would love to hear from where the audience is calling in from today. Please feel free to type the name of where you live in the chat box. You can also use the chat box later to post your questions in the chat towards the end. I'm speaking to you today from the City of London, Ontario. London is situated on the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape peoples. We would also like to recognize the 3 First Nation communities downriver from us in London, Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware First Nation. Bird Friendly London strives to work with these communities to continue to listen, learn, and restore the land and river back to its original vitality wherever possible, to support environmental initiatives, and to help conserve biodiversity. We at Bird Friendly London understand it is our shared responsibility as residents of this region to protect its life, water, and land, and to conserve what's left for future generations. We're committed to working towards creating a community and programs that are inclusive, respectful, and just, and honoring the relationships between all peoples, birds, and the land we share. So with that, I'm really thrilled to welcome our guest speaker today. Joe Pitawanakwat is an experienced educator and traditional knowledge keeper who specializes in plants, medicine, and Indigenous names for plants and animals that occur on Turtle Island. Joe is from Wikwemicong First Nation, located on Manitoulin Island. Joe does some really interesting work on blending traditional knowledge with Western sciences. And today, Joe will be talking to us about birds and how birds are named in the Ojibwe language. So I'm going to hand it over to Joe. Just a reminder to folks entering the call, if you could please turn off your microphone. Thank you very much. Over to you, Joe.
Yeah, sweet. Here we go. We're getting guys from all over the place. What the heck? Hot chunks. That's awesome. Cool. Yeah, so you guys got the muting and admitting and all of that, right?
Got it under control.
Okay, sweet. Thank you. That's awesome. Okay, so yeah, I'm Joe, and so it's actually super interesting. I'll just share with you guys just while everybody's probably still rolling up. I teach about Anishinaabe. I teach about our medicine, our Indigenous medicine. So we got like 230-ish different species of medicine that we use, or different species of plants that we use as medicine. And I spend most of my time teaching this in Indigenous communities, building that knowledge capacity, because, you know, certain experiences, colonial experiences, have really effectively removed that from this knowledge from our communities. And so my job is to kind of try to bring that back, build that capacity within the community to be able to know what kind of the importance of plant medicine in and throughout a healing experience, I guess. So I've been doing that for about 12 years. I started learning 12 years ago, and my community really quickly thrusted me into a teaching role. So then I started teaching about medicine right away, and with big groups and just in my community. And then other communities were like, hey, this kid in Wiki teaching about medicine. You should bring him over here so he could teach us. So I'd go over there, and then I'll go over here, then I'll go over there, then I'll go across the North Shore, and then all of a sudden I was just like out everywhere in Ontario. I have and maintain very intimate relationships with over 150 different Indigenous communities, and probably well over 250 different institutions that I'm just constantly in and out of, like every single year, building as much of that capacity as I can. And this just kind of, the medicine knowledge just kind of fell on my lap. It was my grandma, you know. She just knows medicine because she didn't study it or practice it or dedicate any amount of time to it. She knew plant medicine because you kind of had to. Because if you didn't, you know, you didn't really have good access to a hospital. So you had to know what kind of plants for sickness and injury and disease prevention, these sorts of things. And so she just knew it because she had to. It's just like, you know, when your clothes rip, you got to know how to sew it back up, because you probably only have one set of clothes. And if you're hungry, you got to know how to cook. And it was just a normal thing. It's just a fact of life. It was just life. And so learning from my grandma this kind of knowledge, yeah, just kind of fell on my lap. And I have so much fun studying plant medicine, learning all the science behind it. Like every plant has like 250 different chemicals inside of it. Each one of those chemicals has like 300 to 8,000 studies done on it. And I like digging into every single one for all 230 different species we use. And so I really do my best, you know, when it comes to learning and understanding plant medicine. But it wasn't really something I was super passionate about. Like, I love human health. And that's in my love and passion for human health is what drives my plant medicine research and teaching and all of those processes. Super obsessed with health ever since I was a kid. My mommy is a nurse, registered nurse. She graduated when she was pregnant with me. And so kind of grew up with that lingo, and really appreciative of that, and having this drive to understand what health is. It's very hard to define healthy. And so I have a lot of fun with that. And it's taken me places, taken me everywhere. Costa Rica and Chiapas and Mexico, Zapatista communities. Plant medicine knowledge is super important to Indigenous people. And I'm so privileged that, yeah, all this just kind of like fell right on my lap. So I enjoy it. The thing though that I wanted to share is yeah, like, I don't know, man, this kind of just fell on my lap and I just roll with it. One of my real passions though, we used to have this real I mean, all cats are killers. But we had this little cat growing up, and she'd always bring home all these different types of birds because she was catching them. And I was so fascinated by all the different colors. Like, she had a preference for warblers. And you know, the variety in warblers, you know, you get the northern perillas, they're blue. She used to always bring those home. She used to have these I think, if I was just a kid, so like I didn't know, but I think that her favorite was a Blackburnian warbler. And so I got to spend time like holding them after they were dead. And it was just like, you know, it's a little friggin' dinosaur. So I was like, man, this is kind of crazy. These little birds, they're so light. They're like nothing. And just everything about them kind of fascinated me. And so I was like, okay, well, you know, I really like all of the different sounds in the morning too. And in the evening, all throughout the summer. I was always like, you know, when the frogs, the spring peepers start to go, that's such a incredible sound. And you know, and then all the other sounds too, like those ones that scrub their wings together. They're real loud, buzzing in the cicadas all summer long. Like, I spent a lot of time outside. and I spent a lot of time like in contemplation outside. So I was just like listening to everything, and all the frogs, all the bugs, all of the different sounds that I would hear were always fascinating to me, and especially all of the birds. And so uh, um, when I started teaching about medicine in Indigenous communities, um, I found myself when somebody would talk about, I would be like with a bunch of elders in this community, whether it was in the far north or it was in southwestern Ontario. A lot of our old people want to learn about medicine again because that opportunity was removed from them, and so I'd be like out in the forest with a bunch of older community members, and it was super fun because they'd be like, "Hey." They'd just be sharing knowledge as well, and it's just like an obsession. When somebody gives you something, you have to give something back. And so they always wanted, as I was teaching about medicine, they wanted to teach me about anything and everything, and just happens to be that the number one exposure when you're standing static in the middle of a forest is to listening to all the birds. And so everybody has stories of all of the different types of birds. I heard from my grandpa, this is what my auntie used to tell me. And, a story my grandma told me once. And so like, and then I found myself super attracted to those bird stories and super attracted to the bird names too, because they would say the names of the birds in my language. And I'm a language learner. And so when they would say it, I would say, hey, what was the name of that bird again? And then what does that mean? Like, what is that name describing? And they would name a behavior that this bird has, like the way that it acquires food, or flight behaviors that it has, calls that it has, or maybe a deeper teaching embedded into the observation of that species. And so the bird names were, people were always telling me them everywhere that I went, and I had so much fun kind of just listening and learning and writing them down, contemplating and really trying to understand everything that they were telling me. And so I had a really good exposure to Indigenous bird knowledge. And I remember in my first year, really traveling and teaching, like we were traveling everywhere. Like I would get 2 oil changes every single month, and like 10,000 kilometer like synthetic oil changes. So every single month I was getting like 300,000 kilometers on my car in a year. And so like, yeah, just kill that car so fast. But so much traveling. And one of my favorite things to listen to was like Macaulay's Library. I don't know if any of you guys ever got that, but it's just like I got Macaulay's Library, all of the different warblers. And I would just listen to this woman would just say Blackburnian warbler, and then like the audio of the bird would come on, and then it was like song variation number 12. Like red starts, they have so much different variety, and like listening to all of those while I was driving, just so that I could sit in the forest. When I get to that community, I could to work to teach about medicine, I could sit in the forest in the morning and be able to listen to everything by ear. Something I was super obsessed with. And so yeah, birding by ear, it was a really fun thing. But that's kind of was my gateway. The variety of song and sounds and the ability to identify those, and put a name to those species when I'm in the forest teaching about medicine. It was such a cool skill, I guess. And yeah, it really just kind of kickstarted my like truest obsession with birds. Probably for the good, past like 8 years, they've been really important to me. And so in the past 8 years of community work, I've been completely dedicated to gathering as much bird knowledge as I can. I would just say straight up, sitting in front of a group in Grassy Narrows or in Nipigon or in wherever I ended up being, saying, hey, I want you guys to teach me everything you know about birds. I'll teach you everything I know about medicine. And then like in Pecange, they were like, hey, we got to go get Amy. He knows all about the birds. And so they'd drag Amy out of bed and bring him out for the day. And I would just glean everything I could from even sometimes in my administrative work, before I would go to the community, I would say, hey, yeah, I'll come teach you about medicine. Here's all of the costs and fees and like all of that nonsense. I say, but can you please like identify bird knowledge keepers in your community and try to get them to be there, because that's something that I would really appreciate in return. And sometimes even financially kind of cutting deals, like, yeah, I'll take a pay cut if you'll bring birder out with me, not birder like birder, but Indigenous bird knowledge holder. And yeah, like cutting deals with everybody too. It's like it's because I was so obsessed with it. And so I kind of wanted to share with everybody tonight just some of the things that I learned, and kind of like presenting in a way that would be most beneficial for all of us who just love birds, or just being outside and maybe just starting to get interested in birds. I wanted to share with you guys something that yeah, you could kind of just take it and run with it. I think learning Indigenous knowledge that we have about birds is very interesting, and can be significant at times. Like towards the end of the presentation, I really want to share, I mean, you guys saw in the description even all of the species that I wanted to kind of talk about tonight, but like outside is our teacher is the land. And when we say the land, it includes everything. It includes the birds and clouds. I know we say land, but it is all inclusive of all environmental components. Yeah, so birds included. And in the Anishinaabe language, the way that we say land is ake. Ake is a sound that you hear in our language and so many other terms. And so I think, when we're seeking to learn, when we're looking for a teacher, is how I should say it. When we're looking for a teacher, the way that we describe the teaching process in my language is kinomage. A kinomage, you hear the sound, land is in there. It's the first three letters, or the first sound, the first syllable of that word. A kinomage. That's the process of teaching. And it's kind of seems silly, but we will call schools kinomage gamik. It's the place where we learn, but that is separate from the land. And it's kind of a little bit of a conundrum, a little bit of a weird thing to think about there, but the land is our teacher. Everything that is in it, everything that is on it, everything that flies on top of it is all our teachers. And if we want to be living the life that this land is able to provide for us, if we want to be able to access a good life, we need to learn how to listen to the land. We need to learn the teachings of all of these different plants, of all of these different ecosystems, of all the different waterways, of all the different birds and bugs and insects and minerals. And like there's teachings in everything. They all have something really important to share with us. And so birds are a really incredible resource to learn so many different things, very, very pragmatic things. So I'll just get started. Kind of wanted to get started at with how do I say, just going through Anishinaabe taxonomy. How do we name things? Because this is super interesting. I don't know how many of us know, but the scientific taxonomy of things is dedicated and designed to do one thing and one thing only. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but it means that it's designed for one specific purpose, and that is to positively identify a species. So usually picking out something that is significantly different about that species, something that makes it different than everything else, so that you can guarantee you're looking at that particular thing. That's the scientific taxonomy of plants and birds. It's designed to give us an opportunity to be able to positively identify something. That's it. And it does that very well. It's an incredible process. And even spending time with some of my birders who have a really good scientific taxonomy kind of background, where they, didn't just learn the names of the species, but learned what that actual scientific or Latin name was describing. It's a really amazing art, and I love it. And then, of course, there's common names of different birds. And there's many different approaches to common names, usually distinguishing features. But in Anishinaabe, in my language, the way that we engage in the taxonomy process, the naming of creatures and birds, is kind of the same. We look at what makes the species different, what makes it special, what it does, what makes it different than everybody else. Yeah, so we do use physical features, because the scientific taxonomic process is to look at the physical features only, or for the most part. I mean, it is that way with plants. Like you can't dig up roots. You got to just be able to look at the aerial components of the plant and know that you're looking at that exact species because of this difference, and that is the name that is given to that plant. And interestingly, I don't know if this is the exact same with birds, but in Anishinaabe, we will identify other unique features that a bird does or has. So there's sometimes we will use physical features, like with a red-tailed hawk, we will call it Mesquana nasi. And the first part of that word, msqua, is red, and non-nasi is the word that we use to describe a tail, and so it's just red tail. So like super easy. Yeah, so like red-tailed hawk. Sometimes we'll use physical features that are different than all of the other birds, and that is how we name that creature. But it's really fun looking at my language. So like non-nasi is describing a change that is taking place. And so this red thing that this bird has is causing, or that this entity has, is causing a change to occur. And so obviously the tail is responsible for changing the direction of the bird while it's in flight. And so Mesquana nasi, like, so in the Anishinaabe language, I don't want us to think that non-nasi is a tail, because sometimes it can be a tail, sometimes it can be a rudder on a boat, sometimes it can be this and that. It's describing a process. It's a whole action. It's a whole video. It's a whole scene that's occurring. And that's how we need to understand the Anishinaabe language. When we're naming all of these birds, there's really incredible and elaborate descriptions of what is happening. So we'll get into it. So the Mesquana nasi for the red-tailed hawk, yeah, it's just taking a physical feature and that is making that creature unique. So not unlike the scientific taxonomy process. Something too that I'm super obsessed with. It's proven to be very, very beneficial, especially when we're looking at plant medicine. One of the things I'm super obsessed with is species at risk, and the role that Indigenous knowledge has in helping species at risk. And so with plant medicine, there's this really interesting, amazing idea where every plant has a creature that has a special relationship with that plant. And so when you're describing plant names, you'll hear the names of other animals, the names of other fish, like the wild bergamot, Monarda fistulosa. We call that one moshkoawis. Moshko is an elk. And it's funny, in every other Indigenous language that exists in the territory of the elk, we call that plant the same thing. Moshkoawis, it's a elk medicine. Elk have a very special relationship to that plant. And so in the winter, when you burn that medicine, wherever that smoke goes, if an elk smells it, he's drawn to it, and it puts instinct aside. So it can smell you. Say you're upwind, it can smell you. Hey, this guy's from Wiki, or hey, this guy's from Cambridge. Maybe I'll get shot if I go over there. But the smell of that plant overrides that creature's instinct, and it'll keep walking towards you as long as you're hidden. It's not magic. They're not going to give you a kiss or a hug or anything. But you hear the names of birds and fish and mammals and insects when you're talking about plants. And usually that means that there is a special connection between those two beings. And sometimes we could take advantage of that and, you know, acquire an elk a lot easier, or fish a lot easier. And so in research, it's really amazing to understand. So like with sturgeon is a species at risk. It's a fish. And we have a plant that's called nimepin, that means sturgeon potato. And I worked with a research organization who was able to utilize this plant and the indigenous knowledge protocol of how to fish using the strategy, and they caught more sturgeon in 2 nets, research nets. So it wasn't to eat them, it was for research, and they caught more sturgeon in 2 nets than in 4 years of combined research by utilizing that indigenous strategy. So whenever I look at a bird that is a species at risk, I can't help but become obsessed with the gathering as much of the indigenous knowledge around the species as possible, because you never know when these can help us be more responsible and create processes where we can help these species at risk, like the bobolink, the R2D2 of the fields. And you know what we call this is Jigakashin is what we call it. That means skunk bird. And so, I mean, that's kind of funny. Obviously, you can see why we call it that, because it's looking a lot like the lines of a skunk, you know, something that separates it from. So we're still talking about the physical features of a bird and kind of sharing the same taxonomic processes as scientific taxonomy. It's just, you know, what it's looking like, what makes it different. It's got these 3 big white lines, or 2 white lines that kind of meet in the middle and extend down the back of the bird. It's like a skunk. So that's the kind of memory, or this whole process that we're acknowledging and understanding. This is the bird that looks a lot like a skunk. And so that everybody knows what you're talking about when you describe the species. I got a real soft spot for skunks. But sometimes too, when we're looking at all the different types of birds, is we have their, in the Indigenous or Anishinaabe taxonomy of birds, we can find out what makes them special or unique or different, not just with their physical features, but we can use like nesting behaviors or nesting strategies. And so this one here, the winter wren, is called Nam Sagadoenshi. And so Nam Sak is like the way that we describe it now is like downstairs, I guess, is how we would say namsak is downstairs, but it just can kind of mean like under the floor is namsak. And then you got to think like, oh, well, indigenous people call downstairs namsak, but they never had stairs before. Yeah, so we never had stairs before. So underneath is all that word is describing namsak. It's there's a just like underneath all of the soil. So what happens with the winter wren, with Nam Sagadoenshi, the reason why we call it that, that it has a special connection to something that is underneath the floor. And so we like chisak is a floor, but that's not. That word is not describing a floor. It's in the forest, because floors are new, and so chisak and namsak it's underneath that. And so what happens, or what we probably all already know here, is that the winter wren, its preferred nesting habitat is in the it's in the when a tree is uprooted. So you think of the boreal forest. I think of the boreal forest when I think of a winter wren, anyways. But when the trees are blown over by the wind and you get this massive root system that's exposed, that is the favorite place for this bird to nest, and where it puts its where it trusts that it can hide, and keep its kids safe. So their nesting behaviors are sometimes what makes them unique. And like, I swear on everything, like, I check every uprooted tree. I can never get through a forest in it's like I'm like an old man. Like, I take forever to go through because, like, I always got to check things out. Or maybe I'm more like a little kid. Like, I just always got to check things out. And so whenever I see an upturned or uprooted tree, you always got to kind of just take an extra peek and look in there, because you'll find Nam Sagdo and Shi Suswin, their little nest will be sitting inside of there. And so sometimes, this is what makes these species special, is their nesting behavior. And so that's what we named this bird after. And then I'll also too, like, on top of that, it sometimes can even get deeper. And so lots of us birders are probably already thinking like, well, Nam Sagdo and Shi doesn't just nest in what was once underground, but it's its foraging activities for food, being always looking underneath everything throughout the forest floor, to be able to get the food that it needs. And so there can be double, triple, or quadruple meanings, even, or like times 8 meanings, all infused into one Anishinaabe name, and that encapsulates the identity of that being so well. So Nam Sagado Shi, the winter wren, is one of my favorites. There's just like, I don't know, something about it that the bird is like, it seems like it's like the size of a nickel, and it probably weighs less. But its song is like, it's like friggin' 2-minute song. It's just forever, just trilling and warbling away. For such a tiny bird, it has a really incredible song. But yeah, I really like these guys. Oh, this one is super fun too. Okay, so I want to be able to share with you guys some YouTube videos. I don't know how appropriate it is to just share YouTube videos, but I don't know, like, it's on YouTube, so I should be able to share it, no problem. I try to find like photos that I wouldn't get in trouble for. Somebody came at me, I was sharing a bunch of plant pictures, and they're like, hey, I was sharing my plant pictures, but you cut out my watermark on the bottom. And I didn't even do that on purpose, but he's a cool guy anyway. Anyways, these, I really love waterfowl. Oh, I love teaching about waterfowl and the names of waterfowl, because there's an idea, and you're not wrong, or, I mean, I don't want to put that on anybody, but for the most part, when you think of Indigenous people and Indigenous knowledge, you think, what do we do out on the land? Like, we kill things and eat things. So when I work with like OMRF, when I'm working in environmental groups, it's like one of the things that I get all the time is like, oh, you use plants as medicine. I thought you just pick blueberries and stuff, and like hunt birds and moose and set some nets here and there. Like, I didn't know you use all of these plants as medicine. It's like, oh man, yeah, look, we use everything. And when it comes to waterfowl, they have really beautiful names, and it's not just like about food and about eating them. They're really clear indications that we have how do you say extensive bird behavior observation skills. So we're always checking these birds out. How many thousands of years have we been here? And the land is our teacher. And like, yeah, it's not always just food. Though some of these birds are fantastic in a soup or something. But anyways, the northern shoveler, We call it Madagan the sheep. Madagan the sheep. And that's interesting because if you don't know nothing about birds and you hear me describing Madagan the sheep, that like Madaga is when you're swimming. But that word does not just describe swimming, it's describing a whole process. And so when you're looking at the Madagan the sheep, these shovelers, they have a really interesting, unique behavior that no other bird will do. And they swim around in these circles. Let's like fast forward. They swim around in these circles and they stir up the ground. They stir up the mud underneath to bring up the food that they want. And then they dabble in all of the water that they stirred up. And so swimming, madaga, is not just describing, oh yeah, when you go to the beach, you go swimming. It's describing the whole process of the disturbance. And so that's what these are. Madagan, the sheep, the only birds that or the birds that have this behavior of spinning around and stirring up all of the little bugs and stuff, like, I don't know, benthic macros, and munching on those. I actually don't even really know what their diet is exactly, but yeah, they stir up the dirt beneath them and then dabble in that to get the food that they need. And so sometimes bird behavior is what is significant, and what is unique, not just their physical features, the behaviors that they have. So I have a couple examples of behavior that is significant. So the shoveler was one, and the oh, you know what was another one that I didn't even have on the thing? Check this out. The ruddy duck. You guys know the ruddy duck, right? Real cool, bright blue bill. I love ruddy duck so much. Super stiff tail. Really just a pleasure to watch. We call these now I'm gonna mess it up. Maduean the sheep. Maduean the sheep. And so like guitar, we'll call it mdewe chige or mdewe chogan. Mdewe chige is to describe somebody who is playing music. And so mdewean the sheep is describing a bird that plays music or plays an instrument that is creating a song. And so, you know, when you're looking at the ruddy duck, one of the most interesting courtship behaviors of any waterfowl species, the way that they slap their beak onto the way that they puff out all of their feathers, and they slap their beak onto their feathers and kind of push out all of that water. And so they make this drumming, I don't know how you like snare kind of sound with all of the bubbles that come away from them. Sorry, you can't hear the sound, but I wonder if I can. Yeah. Anyways, I'll play you the other sounds later when it's more relevant. But I was like, yeah, I should just tell these guys about Ruddy Duck, Maduean the sheep. It's someone that plays us music, or that uses itself as an instrument to be able to play music, to be able to have you know, in its courtship displays. So I was real excited about that one. But yeah, I love Ruddy Ducks. But another one, when you're looking at food acquisition behaviors, is very unique for each species. And so like we have names for all the different birds. And one of the things that is kind of overlooked more often than not is that within each family of birds, like woodpeckers, so many different types of woodpeckers: downy, hairy, sapsucker, pileated, and then red-headed, blackback, or three-toed, and then you have the whatever this one is called. It's Moninguane is what we call it. So like all the woodpeckers, you know, you have papase, that's a hairy woodpecker. Then you have papasens, that's a small downy woodpecker. Then you have meme, the wood we used to describe a pileated woodpecker. And this one is called moningwane. And moningwane is describing that it digs. It's the digger. And so within each species, one of the problems that I always come across, hey, what do you call a woodpecker? Papase. That's what everybody will always say, because it drums. And then there's papase, it's a small one that drums. But we have names for each individual species within that family. And they're all emulating a certain characteristic that they have that makes them unique. Obviously, the flicker being one that digs. So it's the one that's always out in our grass, in our lawn, and it's digging around for ants and bugs and worms and things like that. So it's the digger. There's certain behaviors that make these birds special, and that's the names that we use to be able to describe them. So moningwane is the digger. So the other one, oh yeah. Oh, this one's gonna be super fun. See, I freaking love birds, man. I knew this was a dangerous presentation. But okay, so there's a bird. There's hawks. So getting into this family discussion, all of the different birds within a family, hawks was a challenge for me, because when you ask how do you say hawk, kek kek, we'll say kek or gigi, sometimes gigi, and at first, surface level, kind of just sounds like onomatopoeia, right? Like kek 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 kek. That's all they say, or kiki 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 kiki. That's how they talk, which is true sometimes, but there is names for all of the different types of falcons, all of the different types of buteos, and they're all emulating a certain characteristic that bird has that makes them different than all of the other hawks. And so there was one hawk, and working in all of the communities that we go to, bonse is the name of a hawk. And I don't know what kind of hawk it is, but its name is bonse. And so when you take that word and you're trying to figure out what it means, one of my favorite activities is to say bonse. Well, I wonder what other words have bon inside of it. And so babon is the way that we describe winter, the whole season of winter that is, thankfully for the birds, over. So babon is called winter, and that's what that word is describing is when things are stopped, when everything is just kind of like frozen in time for a moment, because like when your kids are doing something that you don't want them to do, bontan, that's what you'll say, stop it, like stop everything, bontan. So you hear that same sound, bon, and so you hear kind of what this word is describing is there's a sequence that's taking place, and it stops for a moment, and then continues on. And so the word that we use to describe rough-legged hawk, bonse, is obviously describing its unique, like all hawks will hover, but no one hovers as much as a rough-legged hawk. This is just really typical behavior for them to be hovering high, hovering low. More than any other species of hawk, these are the ones that hover. And so to apply that name, bonse, to this bird, it's very accurate. And so it's really fun, just kind of teasing out some of these behaviors, flight characteristics that make a species unique. And then that's what the word that we use to emulate or describe that creature. Yeah, I wonder, I could do another flight behavior one. I love that. Bonse, the rough-legged hawk. I couldn't find, I was just pulling these all together like super fast. But the other one is the kingfisher. This is a really common last name, was a really common last name. I don't know how this family is doing anymore, but it used to be something that you'd hear often, is Guichemontegon. Guichemontegon is the name of a common last used to be a common last name, and maybe it's becoming more rare now. I haven't even actually met anybody with this last name, but it's just what people say. Used to be a common last name, and the just the name of this bird, Gish Montegon. One of the things that we could be immediately understanding is something happens real clean. So like gishkam is like when you bite through something and it's real perfect. You know, you bite a sandwich and then like half the stuff falls out, and it's like it's not a clean cut or clean bite through that particular piece of food. But then sometimes when you go through real clean, and so Gish Montegon is describing this action of a kingfisher. I couldn't find the belted kingfisher videos, but their ability to go in and out of the water and just hardly even making a splash, just a couple real subtle ripples come out, and this big bird is going in the water and out of the water in one super slick motion that it's hardly even making a splash. So it's really cleanly going in and out of the water, and that's that's a behavior or something that makes the Gish Montegon really special. And so that's what we use to describe it. I hope this is all making sense so far. My passion is overriding everything, and I'm gonna start running out of time soon. So I'm gonna start talking real fast. But like a signok is the grackle, and it's real simply, the flight patterns and flight behaviors of these birds. A signok, sig is like a group or a gathering of something. So a signok is these birds that just have these, Alfred Hitchcock style flocks that they fly in, or the murmurations, their ability to stay in one giant flock yet all coordinated together. That's something that makes these birds really special. And so I wanted to get into a couple of other ones. I might go over my time like just a little bit, but it's okay though, eh?
Totally fine.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about calls for a second, because bird calls are really special to me. Kind of what got me into birding is just the whole experience of birding by ear. And so I was in this one community, Metagami, one of my most favorite communities to go to. I learned so much about birds there. They're real with it. Metagami is up Highway 11 on the way to Timmins. And Buddy was standing there and he was like, I miss somebody. We used to have this bird. His name is Piask. And like when somebody asks you in the Anishinaabe language, when is something going to happen? Anish P. P is a sound in my language that describes a particular sound or a particular time when something is occurring. When Anish P. And so when he said Piask, I was already thinking time. Something is happening at a particular time and place. It is time that's making this bird significant. Time is making this particular species special. Who does something at a particular time? And he just kept talking about this bird. He really misses it. And then he said, every evening at dusk, you would hear this sound. And he was describing it. That sound that this bird makes, the common nighthawk, we call it piask, because this is something that's very characteristic. Every night at dusk, this is the sound, the call that we would hear. And I didn't really pinpoint the species of it until he said there's two white dots at the tips of the wings. And so when it's flying away, you can see those two white dots. And then I knew that's a common nighthawk. That's what he's talking about. Time is because of the time that this bird is waking up and does all of the calls that it does. And so sometimes, just utilizing these different techniques that make a species significant. Some of them are real cute too, like the red-winged blackbird, who's all coming back now, big flocks of them. But the red-winged blackbird, what a lot of people will call these is chachakano. And that just means, like, I don't know how you would translate this, but like the sneezer. And so it seems like they're sneezing. And I think the common grackles too. Kind of like real cute name to describe a bird as something that, because jachakano is a word that sometimes people will describe a grackle because it just seems like they have a big sneeze. And so we will call them the sneezers. But sometimes, yeah, it's their calls that make them special and unique. Another one of my favorites, the American bittern. Oh man, that's one of my favorites. The bittern is such a special bird for me, but we'll call this one moshkoa or moshk ose is this moshk ose. And what that is describing is like, it's described to me differently too. People have different interpretations of the same word. I mean, which kind of like points to the diversity of our language, how descriptive that it actually is. So like a bittern, moshk ose, like there's even automatopoeia there, like moshk ose, the way that it sounds, right? But if you're taking the understanding of that word only, moshk ose is describing an effort that is taking place beneath, and the way that we'll describe it is water. It's like this bird is underneath water, and that's where it's crying, that's where it's yelling from, or that's where its song is coming from. And the only sounds that you hear is what is emerging out of the water from him singing underneath. So moshk ose. But it's also like the area, the environment that bird grows in is mshkosneing, is a meadow. And this is the bird, it's the king of the meadow. As far as larger birds are concerned, this is where it loves to be, in the tall grass meadow. And so like it's multifaceted, that automatopoeia moshk ose, but describing that effort coming from beneath the water, like as if it's struggling to try to sing while it's drinking at the same time. And then, but also emulating this dominant nature of this bird within a specific ecosystem, the tall grass meadow, all of that is embedded into the one name of this species. And then real quickly, I kind of wanted to be able to talk about sometimes the names of these birds are ecological functions too. Like a vulture is winage. And I just asked my mom the other day, I was like, what do you think that means? Winage, like it sounds like it's just an ugly bird. And she was like, yeah, it does sound terrible. And she's like, what is that, a vulture? And it was. So like winage is just like an ugly bird. But then she took a second and she was like, no, you know what? I think that's too simple of a way to describe this bird. And yeah, it might not be the most beautiful thing to the eye, but that last part of the word, the winage part of the word or the name, is describing a change that is taking place. Like it's changing from something that is ugly And so she said it's probably speaking to its ecological function as being responsible for taking carrion and converting it into something more palatable for the ecosystem. And so taking these things that are ugly and stinky and being responsible for that conversion. And so it was super fun just learning all of the names of these birds and the amount of observation that's needed to be able to come to these conclusions. Like Mnomintke is the rails, like Sora rails and Virginia rails. Minomin is wild rice. Mnomintke is the one who plants wild rice. And so if you ever get the chance to observe a rail, and in the wild, you know, they're real messy, like the way they run through the cattails. If you ever get the opportunity, like all you photographers out there, I don't know how many people are here, but you get out there at dusk or like when the sun is at a certain angle, when the wild rice is ripe, and find the Sora rails within there, because one of the most glorious observations is hearing the rails crying in the meadow, and then hearing their little pitter patters, and then watching the wild rice fraying off of the plants. And when the light is catching it perfectly, it's one of the most glorious images that I've ever been able to observe. So I think, you know, super special, this bird's responsibility to be planting some of the wild rice for us, making sure that it's always there, knocking some of the seeds off of the plant before they're harvested or eaten by all of the waterfowl. And so sometimes the names of birds will point to their ecological functions. Man, rails are super fun to observe too. Okay, so I wanted to get into real fast, and yeah, sorry, I might go over a little bit, but it's probably okay though. I wanted to just kind of touch on just a little bit what birds have to be able to teach us, because they have lots of really amazing teachings. They have so many things. If we are observing them and interpreting their behaviors as you know, as means to be able to live our lives appropriately, to have access to a good life, these are knowledges that we're required to consult with. Bird observation is necessary if you want to live a good life. And so one of the things that I've been really interested in lately is mourning. A lot of people will tell me that, you know, birds have a unique ability to teach you how to mourn properly. Say somebody dies, dog dies, whatever happens, you know, something really sad happens, and you want to be in a state of mourning, but you might be having difficulty. It's these birds that are going to be able to teach you. So one of my favorites, and interestingly, all of the birds that have these mourning teachings all have red eyes, like as if they've been bawling their eyes out. They've been sad for so long that their eyes are just bloodshot red, because of how often that they cry. And so each species that has red eyes, spend a little bit more time with it. Like, you ever hear the Sora? You hear the Sora crying away, wailing away in a meadow. You can't help, but it sounds beautiful. It sounds kind of ominous, but more than anything, it sounds sad. And same with the loon, right? Those like super long, ominous wails of a loon have a unique ability to pull that opportunity to cry out of you. And you see their red eyes, and you hear them, the sound of their songs and cries is they have something to share with you. And so I'll share with you another one that has red eyes. Is a sorry. The Vireo is another one. This one is actually super cool. So I'll tell you, like, real quick story. Okay, I was out in the bush with a group of women, and women who have been through survivors of violent crimes. One of my favorite groups to speak with. We were out in the forest, and I was explaining to them, all these different birds, they have so much to teach us. And so there was like the red-eyed vireo, just like all day, just yelling away, just constantly, every little corner of the forest, of every forest that we walk through, you hear the red-eyed vireo. And I said, this bird has red eyes, and we could see it because I had my binoculars, so we could see the red eyes. And they're like, wow, that's really special. And then they said, well, what does it teach you about mourning? And then we heard a call. And so the woman heard the call, and when she heard it, she just fell. She just fell to her knees, and she just started bawling her eyes out. And she was like, what it was, the way she described it after, it was like she has so much trauma and anger and sadness inside of her. And it felt like when she listened to that bird calling, that it was just squeezed right out of her. And then she just fell and then started bawling her eyes out. And so the red-eyed vireo has this ability or opportunity to be able to teach us about or provide a place and a space for that proper mourning to occur. And they're more common than anything. Another one of my favorite birds that has this red eye, well, maybe not technically some of them don't have red eyes, but a red lining around their eye. But anyways, the black-billed cuckoo is super special to me. So one thing about the black-billed cuckoo, when we're observing it, it has something to show us about mourning. And so I kind of want you to just interpret it for yourselves. I'll play it for you guys. So you know how when you're about to cry, but you're trying to stuff it, the way that we describe the frog in our throat. It's really neat, all of the opportunities that birds have to share with us about our responsibility to let that go. And so to see that and to have that proper interpretation of what this bird is trying to teach us or can teach us, and can show us about living a good life here, it's really special. And the same thing with the killdeer as well. I'm pretty sure they're monogamous. Somebody can correct me. I'm sure there's tons of corrections in the chat. I'm probably showing even wrong species. But I'm not the most fantastic birder. I just am obsessed a little bit. I'm getting there. But the killdeer, when they get here, they scream in the fields. They're just crying away in the fields, waiting for their partner to get here, because they don't travel together apparently. And so they get here before. And so when they're in the fields and they're crying, they're crying, they're letting it out, they're longing for their partner. Wait. Yeah, man, I don't know. It's just super cool the way that we'll describe. Oh, all of the birds that have red eyes um, will teach you about mourning, and your responsibilities to those processes. And then every bird that you look at that has red eyes, I have something super special to share with you. Sometimes too, and I got like, this is my last example, okay? I promise it. But um, the white-throated sparrow, there's all different names that you hear everywhere, but they're all kind of talking about rain and when it is going to rain. And so this is like the weather bird. And so you know, the birds and their opportunities to teach you and to give you an understanding of your surroundings. You know, these are instincts that we as a species do not have the ability to understand, because we don't see things the same way. We don't experience or feel things the same way. But animals can and do. They're within the confines of instinct, and they're bound to all of those procedures involved. And so when it comes to white-throated sparrows, they're the weather bird. They have that long, poor Sam, Peabody, 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 or Canada, 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 however you want to say it. But they have that super long song. The longer that song is, the nicer day it's going to be. And so if it's a super long song, the chances are this is happening when it's blue skies. And so you'll hear, it just go like this. You'll hear the super long song. Yeah. And then what happens as the rain becomes closer or inclement weather is approaching, it gets shorter. And then when the rain is getting real close, it just stops and just says, boop, it, and then it stops. The rain is like 5 minutes away. Why don't you guys test that out? It's been, you know, you could go out on a super ugly day and it's like, oh, it's all gloomy and cloudy. It's going to be raining all day. The weather network says 80%. But if you listen to all of these birds, they'll tell you when it's going to rain. And I could confidently go out with a group of 60 kids and when it's supposed to be pouring rain or raining all around us. And if you listen to that bird, you listen to that song get shorter and shorter, get closer and closer to going inside. And it's just a really amazing teacher to be able to share with us, just all about the weather. We have so many other examples of things that you can learn from birds, like in hunting, in Cree communities, especially where there's still caribou herds. The ravens will tell them they have 2 clicks that they'll do that are very distinct. And if you tune into those birds, they'll give you those 2 clicks, and then you follow them, and they'll take you to the closest caribou. And people use this all the time. And then as a responsibility in those relationships, you give a gift to those birds. And so you keep them going, and they'll keep you going. And so it's really fascinating, you know, bird knowledge and especially like Indigenous knowledge, the significance of birds. They're a very special learning opportunity, and interpreting bird behavior in taxonomy, but in our ability to live a good life here, it's all very valid. And I think that just being here, we're responsible to that, and it makes for really amazing birding experiences, to have these an opportunity to be able to share Indigenous significance of birds, what they have to share, what they have to teach us, the intricacies of taxonomy, and the depth of our language and its descriptive nature. It's all very special. So yeah, you know, I better shut up soon. I was just really thankful for this opportunity to spend time with so many bird lovers, language lovers, maybe even a lot of plant lovers out here, just those of us who like being outside and observing nature, to kind of help orient ourselves as to where we are and what we are responsible for, and the potential that we have in these kinds of new understandings. So super thankful there for Birds Friendly reaching out and setting everything up. I was looking forward to this for so long. I'm still, it's crazy. So, you know, have fun, man. Get out there and listen, interpret, spend time with Indigenous knowledge holders. They have lots to share. Maybe we could have a little bit of a discussion or a Q&A kind of, or no?
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. That was a really fantastic presentation. I learned so much. I know the group definitely got a lot out of it. Would be happy to take a couple of questions from the group. We probably don't have time to cover a ton, but If folks want to raise their hand, or you can type your question into the chat, we'll call on you. I have just one question to start off. If folks want to learn more about your work and follow what you get up to, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm just Creator's Garden, Joseph Pitawanakwat on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I have a Patreon. But yeah, just Creator's Garden is where most people can find us. Yeah, there you go. Bunch of us in the chat. Yeah, oh, Marlene. Cool. Okay, let's go. Got a couple hands up. Oh, Sandy. Oh, okay. Who should we?
So let's see who has their hand up. Sure. Marlene, I think your hand went up first. So feel free to jump in with your question.
I think first, but I'll take the opportunity to be first. So, Joe, I really thank you so much. That was so much information, and it's gonna, when I'm walking around looking at birds, it's definitely going to bring a different perspective and in terms of observations. My question is more about, I guess, the birds that are a part of the clan system in Anishinaabe, and I'm always curious how this, became those clans. Like, I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think a lot was lost in our clan systems. And one of the things that we're recovering in all of the communities that I've had exposure to anyways, is that that we remember clan leaders. And one of the things that has been very effectively removed from our communities and from our knowledges, from our identity, is everybody else. Because there are turtle clans, and but like different species as well, like blandings and like everything, right? And so all the different types of birds, we have clan leaders, like a crane is a really famous clan leader, but every bird was responsible for a clan family. Every mammal, every plant was responsible for within the clan family. And now, just because of colonial experiences, I guess, we can only really remember clan leaders. And so our responsibility, I guess, and to dig deep and do what we can to try and remember what these what our clan is specifically. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, and this is a super fascinating idea for sure.
Thanks, Marlene. Sandy, did you have a question?
Okay. Well, really it was a reaction more than anything. I'm just really glad that you had this at this time of the year. I just noticed I work third shift, so I'm up in the middle of the night, and I have been missing hearing the birds waking up at dawn, or just before dawn when it's still dark. And now I just noticed it again, come back like this week, the birds singing again. I'm a little bit further south than you guys. I'm down by Chicago. So the birds are back here, and I can't wait. And the other thing is I wanted to mention is when would be a good time to start putting the feeders out, to start attracting some really nice birds to your windows and your yards and such. Would this be a good time for that right now, or should I have been doing that already?
You go, Brandon.
Sure, I can jump in. Feeding birds really can be done at any time of the year. It's most beneficial in the winter months when a lot of the birds' natural food sources aren't available, like insects and flowering plants. You can start feeding now though, and birds will find their way to you. Just make sure when you're feeding birds, of course, you're cleaning your feeders regularly. You don't want birds all sharing the same dirty fork. And keep your feeders a safe distance from your windows to prevent birds from accidentally bumping into the reflection. Usually within 1.5 feet is recommended.
And of course, predators, when there's cats and coyotes and stuff, I'm sure we don't need them as bait.
Yeah, always good to be mindful of who else is visiting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question in the chat from Celia, I think.
Okay.
Correct pronunciation. It's in regards to the bobolink. Is there a different name for the female which doesn't look like a skunk?
No, that's a good question. I guess I should say I don't know, but I don't think so. I think that yeah, it's a good question. I don't think it's a different name though. Bobolink is a bobolink and they'll carry the same name. Yeah.
All right, I see two more hands raised. Jeb.
Thank you, Joe. It's a wonderful presentation, and it's so good to think about. It's so good to think about how you can use different people's understandings to do better conservation. And a story that I thought it would be interesting to you, I've spent a lot of time in Vietnam working with Eastern Saurus cranes. And in Vietnamese, the crane is translated as Siu Dot which means basically a big bird with a red head. And nobody understands or pays attention to that name. But the crane in the pagoda is hack. And if you go in the Mekong Delta and talk with a rice farmer and ask where Siu Dot is, they don't know. But if you ask where hack is, they tell you all about it. They say, oh, they sleep over here in the night and they get up in the morning and they go over here during the day. They know it very well, but they only relate it to what they understand is the bird in the pagoda, not the ornithological name that's been given to them by, in this case, the French.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah.
We got a question from Laura.
Hi, yes. Hi, Joe. Thank you so much. This was so interesting, and just your passion and enthusiasm just comes through so strongly and just engages everybody listening, and it just makes me want to go outside and look for birds immediately. So thank you. I was just wondering, you know, for those of us who are non-Indigenous and want to learn more from Indigenous bird knowledge keepers, what is the best way to approach these knowledge keepers in a respectful way to learn?
I don't know. It's going to be different everywhere. But it's good though that we're in a place of understanding now that those relationships do need to be established, that there is value there for the both of us. Those have been some of the most satisfying conversations if I have a proper ornithologist and a bird knowledge expert, and we are out on the field. Man, that's fire. It's such a cool experience, and there's so much to learn. Like I just kind of like just gave a little tickle and that's it. There's so much out there, and yeah, however that can happen, it needs to happen, and it's just going to be different everywhere. It's like, you know, asking anybody, you know, starting a relationship with anybody, like it's complex in the beginning, but you know, we're responsible in those relationships, and we'll figure it out, especially if there's something to gain in that relationship. So kind of like thinking about it just in the plain old relationship terms that we all know and understand. Yeah, when you meet somebody, you don't see or maybe we do, eh? Like go up to somebody's friend and be like, hey, you know, I wanted to talk to so-and-so. What's a good way that I could, that you can set us up like respectfully? And you know, but friend is just gonna, you know, feel like a little third wheel and just be like, well, just go and talk. Go and figure it out for yourself. You know, just chat it up and see what happens. I don't know, maybe the same dealio. I can make things complicated, but I like to kind of just keep things simple. It's just like, you know, back in high school, you want to go and chat with somebody. You're going to figure out a way eventually. And sometimes you just got to chomp the bit and jump in, see what happens, learn from it. And and be doing this, repeatedly over and over again until you figure out what works. It's going to be different with everybody. So I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Lynn
All right.
Marie.
I see we got quite a few questions now. Mindful of the time, I've got a question in the chat about an endangered species. I know you're excited about species at risk. Someone named Royce is asking if you know of the name for piping plovers. They're an endangered species.
I don't know. You're probably better off going to Algonquin speaking communities out east, where the bigger populations are. I went out east this past summer and I was on a mission on the sidelines. I wanted to see whales, but I was like, man, these Mi'kmaq, because it's an Algonquin language too, so it's the same thing. I mean, we describe birds in the same everywhere. Like our languages and dialects might be different between Cree, Algonquin, Anishinaabe, Odawa, Potawatomi, Mi'kmaq, but when you're talking about birds, it's all the same. Like it's Hmong everywhere is loon, and it's said the exact same way. Interestingly, so you're gonna have to consult with our East Coast friends.
That's good advice. I see Lynn Marie's got a question.
Lynn Marie.
Bonjour, Nichia.
Good to hear you again.
Yes, I wanted to make a comment about generally about all the teachings and learnings that you pass on to people. And I noticed something very, very beautiful and significant. I work in the field of healing and wellness in the Sioux Lookout region in northwestern Ontario. And one of the things that I've been working on, and it's really slow, is truth and reconciliation. And so your teachings here, whether they're plants or birds, any of the things about Shikakamokwe, you're telling the truth about things, how you're telling the truth about life. And you know who is listening? All those Jaganash. Oh my God, it's so beautiful, Joe. Zozap! I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. I'm excited because this is a very beautiful way to have Jaganash listen to Anishinaabe Indigenous knowledge, and to come to some terms that Indigenous knowledge is real, it's profound, it's all of life. And if they can believe that all of this is true, anything that we experience as Anishinaabe, Indigenous people, is that, you know what? It's true. Listen to the speakers. So, oh, miigwech, ozep, miigwech.
Sweet. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. That was kind of like, it's always the background of what I do. That's always a goal. Sweet. Yeah, to me, that's all those kind words there. Lynn Marie from the north.
All right. Julie Milan. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing.
Close enough. Bonjour, Joe. So just a quick question, because I kind of understand it, but maybe some of the audience does. Because you talked about when the bird, somebody was asking you about whether the bobolink has the female bobolink is named differently. And you use the term carrying when we're talking about somebody carrying that name. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
I don't know. Maybe that just fell out of my face on accident. But yeah, I don't know. Isn't that It's just the word that I used, I guess. So they carry. That's actually interesting. I'll be thinking about that now. How come I use certain words? I'm usually try to be like, yeah, real careful with the words that I use. So I wonder, yeah, really what's going on there. But carrying is a verb, or I don't know how to describe it, but it's something that you do when you're given something. When somebody gives you something, you're carrying it. So these names are given. So there's something that these creatures carry that's not intrinsic to their nature, but it's a descriptor that we describe them as carrying. And so actually in the taxonomic process, from an Indigenous perspective, these names were not given by us. The naming of all of the birds and animals and plants and everything was done so, I guess I could probably just say in spirit. I guess it was transferred through a different kind of understanding, I guess. And I think I really submit to that. As critical as I am, I really find myself having to submit to that, because there's no way that these, I kind of touched a little bit on it tonight, but the names of birds encapsulate so much of their identity, as well as onomatopoeia, as well as the environment that they're found in and where they nest, and flight behaviors and colors and patterns, and like all of that embedded into just one name. It seems pretty spectacular. So I always submit to these names being given. And so it is something that they carry, I guess, if I could just kind of shoot from the hip and answer that. I hope that helps there for Julie.
All right, I am conscious of the time, and folks are probably getting kind of hungry. So I've got 2 more hands raised, and then I'm afraid we'll have to call it there. But thank you everybody who submitted questions, and sorry if we didn't get to yours.
Okay.
I've got, is that Ketha or Keitha?
Yes, Keitha, thank you. Sego, Joe. I just wanted to ask, I so enjoyed this. I'm total bird nerd. And learning all the other things about it is, I have an affiliation with the Tyendinaga Mohawk out here, and so learning all the languages is very good. I'd just like to know when your second bird teachings are going to happen.
Let's go round 2, Brendan.
I'm game.
I'm totally there.
Yeah.
Now, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Last question is from Cian or Sean.
Yeah, it is Sean. Wow, thanks. Yeah, Joe, I just wanted to say thank you so much. And the part about the birds that teach us about mourning really was super interesting for me. I've been very fortunate in my life to do a lot of bird watching in Southern Africa, and there is a very common bird there, the emerald spotted wood dove, and this bird is really associated with mourning. It has a very long, mournful call, and the local Indigenous folk there say that the call is saying, my parents are dead, my friends are dead, all of my children are dead, boo hoo 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 hoo. And it's considered very unlucky to go looking for this bird, because it's crying about all of its family and friends that have died, and you're interrupting that mourning if you go looking for it to like take pictures or see it or disturb it. And so I really love that, because that also teaches you about mourning. Sometimes when you are in mourning, you do want to be left alone to just like deal with your own, grief and thoughts and the loss that you're feeling. So I really love that section about that. So thank you very much.
Oh, man. That's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing. I can't wait to listen to that bird.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I went through a couple of species. Leave it to you guys to to do your own research and your own observations, birds with red eyes, and come to your own kinds of conclusions with some of the remaining species. So I just kind of wanted to tickle these ideas and just see what happens, you know, when birders run with it. All bright bunches of bird lovers. I think that it's good to have all of us out there and responsible for all of these knowledges. Yeah, and just kind of tuning in. There's a lot to learn out there. Yeah, so that's super fun. Yeah, cool. Oh,
all righty. Thank you guys. I mean, such great questions. And I think good vibes all around too. Nice way to end the week. Thank you so much to Joe again for an excellent presentation. I think we all learned a lot. I am pasting a link in the chat for our attendees. We're always looking to hear from you guys, feedback about your experiences of our events and how we can improve, make sure that our events are accessible and inclusive. So please do fill that out and get in touch. We will be posting a recording of this presentation online in a few days so it can be shared with people who want to be in the know and learn more about Joe's work. So with that, thank you everybody for coming out. I think this was a lot of fun, and we'll let you know when the next one is.
yeah, cool beans, man. Thank you so much for setting all this up. It was amazing.